of the Metro Retro. So this is a tool that we use at work. Some of our product team use it at work. It's pretty great. It's good for different styles of retros, but also discovered recently, it's got in coffee option in there as well. So you can see a lot of how the flow goes. So if you're not aware of Lean Coffee, you can actually read about it here. And there's a link. You can actually see the step-by-step how Lean Coffee works. With Metro Retro tool itself, you've got voting here. Actually, probably should start with the controls. You can find shortcuts here that will give you a lot of information about the controls of the tool. Some of you probably have, you can see you've learned about the public and private state of your cards. So I can see, for instance, if you can see on my screen, there's cards here that are set to private. If you wanted to make them public, so people can see what they are to vote on them, you should click this button here. It'll go green. Yeah, so this is a move tool. So you can add, when you're in the move tool, you can move other people's cards, you can move your own cards, you can add cards as well. Pretty straightforward. To delete a card, you can click on it, press backspace or delete button, and just does that. That's pretty much it. We don't need to know about these things. This is just if you wanted to group them. I did it specifically for people who are joining the board to see what's going on. Hello. Also, you can have reactions, smiley faces, and stuff like that if you wanted to use them. And as you've seen before, confetti, which is fun to just do. I think we should take a couple of minutes now to add cards, unless, well, I'll just do a minute to allow people to add cards, even though there's a few already on there. After we've done that, we can do a couple of minutes or a minute of voting. If you want, you can start voting for the cards now as well. Does anyone have any questions? No? Cool. It looks like to me everyone's pretty much done voting. Not voting, adding cards. So I think it's fair to say it would be good if whoever added these two would be good if they set it to public so other people can see what they are. You'll know if your one's public. It'll tell you at the bottom your sticky notes are public. Cool. If there's anyone that can't or doesn't have access to the board for whatever reason, can't add the cards, I can add it for you if you like. Just drop a message somewhere in this tool or just shout at me, whichever way you prefer. I'm just gonna get rid of this thing here so it's not in the way.
Sorry. So how many do we vote on? Do we vote on as many as we want, or?
So let's do 5 votes each, so it might be easier that way. Okay. Yeah, it's a good question. Should have said that.
Okay. Oh, how do you remove votes?
It's a good question. I don't think
one twice.
That's fine. Don't worry about it. I mean, if you just throw in a few, I just said 5, but you can do 5 to 10. It's fine.
I've only got 3 votes left then.
There is a way to clear, but I think you have to clear all of them. Is everyone done voting or need another few minutes to vote? Cool, seems we're good. I'm gonna try and see if you see anything that's similar type of tone or theme in terms of questions, we can group them together. So let's have a first identify ourselves the ranks. So, okay, 1, 2. So I'm gonna move that across to here. Cool. So what do we have? We have what percentage of a UI API automation? Okay. Okay, best proper. Yeah, I think that's fine. We can go back to these and review them. So what we're going to do is we're going to start having a discussion of the top cars at the moment, and then we'll move back and then pick up a few more if we have time. Is that fine?
Yeah, sounds good.
Yes,
That's fine.
So who's ever done this card? Do you want to tell us a little bit about context so we can have a discussion of this?
yeah, that's me, Seema.
Right.
A lot of time, we do a lot of UI automation and a bit of API automation as well. Looking at the triangle, the pyramid, automation pyramid, it almost always looks like UI should be the least, and we should have maximum unit tests, fewer integration tests and API tests, and very minimum UI. But we almost always tend towards writing more UI tests and lesser API tests because we want the end product to be working perfectly. And that's where just wanted to know what's a good percentage, or where do we draw the line?
Cool. So what's the, so you have at the moment UI tests through Selenium or through some sort of framework? What kind of percentage? Do you have something set up right now, I guess?
Yes, so we have WebDriver IO JavaScript, the WebDriver IO framework using JavaScript for the web-based applications, and which also includes visual regression automation as well as the functional side of it. We have smoke test, regression test, and classifications of the test there. And then we have for iOS and for Android, again, front end using Java and Appium, but very few API tests. It's mostly developed by developers using Python. So it's just mix and match, and we want to bring it in line to make it one set of tools that everyone uses rather than just different languages.
Mm. Does anyone have experience or want to add something to this?
So we have API tests and UI tests, and I must say, I feel like most testers seem to start with UI when they start learning test automation. Mm. And I think it's just purely down to the way that developers go from the code towards projects, and then testers look at the product first and then go into the code. And I think it's just more down to where each person starts, where they start looking, and the APIs are in the middle, and they often get forgotten about, I think, as a result.
Yeah,
I do feel like which is probably why it happens that way. I do feel that it's I think because I think the reason the pyramid is just because of the nature of UI tests, which can be very flaky, but that almost implies that they're not as valuable. So I don't think that means that we should be having less UI tests, but just because they take longer to run, we just can't have too many of them. And I think if sometimes if the priorities of the if it depends, I think it all depends on what you want to get out of automation. If you're not getting any value out of API automation, then maybe you should be focusing more on the UI, but at the same time not forgetting them at the same time.
Yeah, I
What
agree.
might what might be better as well is because we had the same problem. We had a lot of UI automation, like we're even covering like all the different negative test cases. But when we started to review all our test scenario, we found out that some of them we can put on the API layer and manipulating what our test data looks like. And then on our UI tests, it's all just a happy pot. I'm not sure if that's something that you could try. Just, you can still have this UI test in place, but maybe if you have a scenario where you're doing, I guess, like 4 or 5 different variants, then maybe you can push some of them on the API level and only have the happy pot on the UI level.
Is everyone happy to continue having another couple of minutes conversation on this?
Yeah, I don't think we're over with this. Yeah, I think yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna restart that. Cool. I just wanted to throw in my 2 pence in there. So we have obviously, in our teams we have automation from multiple layers as well. We try to align the languages. Something you mentioned before, you have multiple technologies and languages. I think it's all contextual. It's really important to recognize that it's all about the context. So if the teams need to have different languages for whatever reason or different technologies, that's fine. That's acceptable as long as everyone has some form of documentation that they can then new people to review, read, understand. In terms of like the percentages and the triangle thing, there's a really good resource by Richard Bradshaw. He does automation and testing with Matthew Worthington, yeah. Where you can find that he talks about it's all about the context. A company doesn't always have to have or can always have the triangle. It can have a T shape. You can have like a sand dial thing. It can have different shapes. But from what we try to achieve in our company, for instance, against contextual, is we have like Cypress in place for component testing and for mocked API type testing. We have WebDriver IO, JavaScript, or TypeScript actually, for end-to-end coverages that does some happy path testing, like Marie has said. We have all sorts of, we have integration and unit tests, and there's different teams that take care of it. Some of it taken care of by the test team, some taken care of by developers, and I think it's sort of critical to recognize that it's all about the context, and there isn't a right or a wrong answer. It just needs to be under constant review. Sorry, I've taken that 2 minutes there, but I can add another few minutes to chat.
No worries. Can I know what is the famously tech stack used for the API automation apart from the REST Assured and Java? Anyone else using any other tools like for API automation?
We use SpecFlow, which is C#, and yeah, it's we do both APIs and UI tests on that. And I think because you use both and we've all got it all in one place, it works very well.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's
SpecFlow for API testing.
I think that's just for the business, isn't it? Just to write the scenario as like a Cucumber.
Yeah, SpecFlow has the nice scenarios, which are a nice friendly format. So even the business, even people who don't understand code can understand them. And then you drill down beneath each line of the test scripts, the human readable test script, and you have the code behind it. So
underlining, are you using a kind of REST assured or anything easy REST or something like that?
Which API?
Because you need something to put a call or get a call. Like REST assured, what it does is it just takes up your request and send the request to the server and get back the response. So just asking in terms of that.
I'm using HTTP client in C#.
Okay.
Using Cypress in our JavaScript code base.
Cool. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think there's lots of technologies out there in terms of utilization for API testing. Are we happy to move on to the next card? Yeah, cool,
Yeah.
great. Which actually seems to go into a bit of BDD here and TDD. Cool, let's give it 4 minutes and kick that off. Who's out of this?
Before starting this conversation, I have a question against about this BDD approach. Do we definitely need to follow this BDD approach to automate the application, whether it's API or UI? Because BDD is something about creating the transparency between team members about the requirements. But when it comes to automation in BDD, we need to do a lot of things for BDD structure architecture rather than automating the application. So it's a kind of 50% effort we need to put on BDD first and then 50% effort on automating the application. So is it really worth spending time on following BDD format to automate the application, whether API or UI?
Okay, it's me who has added this point. So I just want to go back to the basic and just retrospect ourselves, because I have put it down as a BDD or TDD. So basically, just to give a context. So when we have a requirement, so maybe our developers would be developing something which we don't want to have in our application. So that's where we have to refine the requirement and come up with all kind of scenarios even before the development starts, so that the developer would be focusing only on the defined scenarios which are come out from the freezed acceptance criteria. So rather than the developers developing all kind of possibilities or something like that, so you give them, so this is what I needed you to focus on, like delivering all this acceptance criteria or the number of scenarios. So does it make sense? Or
Yes, yeah, almost, yeah. Thank
yeah,
you.
yeah, that's where I just wanted any company or anyone is following, as we read it from theoretical point of view, like from the start of the project, where we have kind of epic level, then break into the stories. So when you talk about a sprint, so anyone is following this BDD approach, where before even you start the sprint, are you writing the feature files and getting it ready when you go for a planning session or estimation session?
So we tend to write the scripts at the same time as the developers is doing the developments, and but the developers always review the scripts before the tests, before actually running. They always review the scripts to make sure it does match what we're expecting. Although I don't think we really follow, as testers, I don't really follow the BDD TDD approach. I think the developers do, but I don't think. I did come to an interesting talk once, and someone saying that they believe that BDD and TDD is more for developers, not for testers. There is obviously the testing aspect of it, which we may take some part of it, but really the actual approach is probably more followed by the developers to make sure that their code is correct.
So I think the main point what I'm seeing here is like when you have the feature file and the whatever the background things like step definition or the page object, when you have the skeleton is ready, so when a developer finishes a particular story, so you can ask the developer to spin up an instance on his machine and point your test to run against that, so that you can catch or find the bugs so early than it sneak into the later stage. So that's where I'm thinking. So if we could follow this approach, so the turnaround time would be drastically come down.
I think it matters about what you're trying to automate. Like in my previous workplace, we used to write it in the same sprint. So when the developers have started developing, we would start writing BDD scenarios, and then the developers would get an opportunity to review the BDD scenarios, and that way ensure that they've covered everything while they're developing. But in my current place of work, the stories are not so well defined, or it's not very you say the stories are not written, or features are not written very well defined, that we can start writing the scenarios early on. So it's not really possible for us to write in advance or even during development. We talk a lot in the sprint planning, but not we don't get to write it.
3 amigos meetings would be useful in such cases. For
Yeah.
Yes, I'm sure.
Definitely, yes. That seemed more useful to us than actually writing these scenarios in our current situation.
So we found that a ticket can't be defined as ready for work until we have those concrete requirements. If there's any confusion at all, then we still talk about it. We don't put its definition of ready until if they're not as well, if it's not clear, then we can't start working on it at all. That's pretty much a rule. I think I think you could really start developing it until you actually were certain about what the requirements were. We still have 3 amigos. We have 3 amigos. So basically, we have communication at all stages, just to make sure that there's no confusion at all. But I think I don't think you can really have a BDD or TDD approach without being certain of the requirements.
Yeah, I think it's all about the timelines, and I think some companies they say 3 amigos is not necessary. I hear it a lot. So I don't know. It's how it's all based on the teams or the way of working, maybe.
Just to add to Louis, so we also don't use BDD approach on testing. We don't use feature files in our tests, but what we found useful is before making sure that we can put a ticket as ready, that we all have the different scenarios and everyone is on the same page. And what we're doing now is, rather than the testers writing the test, is the developers who write the test for us. That's why we pick Cypress as our testing tool, because rather than them like giving us a piece of work and say, okay, the feature is ready, you can now write the automation test. We've now decided that since developers can code anyway, they can also write the test. And then during like peer reviews, we just make sure that they haven't forgotten any of the scenarios that are listed on the ticket. So I think BDD, like the BDD approach shouldn't just be on making sure that you have all the like feature files written in Gherkin format, because you can also achieve this without using Cucumber or without using SpecFlow, as long as the way you've written your test descriptions are clear. Then I think that's much more important. And before you put the ticket to done, that everyone's on the same page and have agreed that this is the work that we need to do.
Yes, totally agree. Are we happy to move on, or we want to continue talking about this point? Guess we're moving on. Well, that's an interesting one.
Yeah, so I wrote this one, but I think I didn't really have anything particular in mind, just more of like just a general discussion of where do we think test automation is going and how we might need to change our practices in the future. So this interpret this one however you want.
I mean, there's a lot of stuff to do with, I know it's a buzzwords, it's been buzzwords for a while, but machine learning and AI has been on the horizon, and not in the way that we think, and not in the way of replacing human and our cognitive abilities to actually perform testing, but in a way such as that it will aid us better to find, for instance, a good example in the context of UI testing, finding elements is a good one. So locating elements through image recognition. Obviously, it's a bit slow right now, but there's few people out there who are working on making it better.
I think there's also a comeback of codeless test automation tools. So for example, Selenium IDE is now back. It has support for Chrome. There's a lot of other commercial tools out there that offers intelligent codeless automation. So I feel that that's also like coming back. And there's a lot of AI algorithms now in these automation tools as well.
Yeah.
Very related to this, can I ask, with more and more developers starting to write automation, is that taking away the testers getting involved in automation, writing tests?
Yeah.
And it sometimes it feels nice that the whole team is involved, developers are involved, but at the same time I start feeling maybe we're losing touch in actually writing the code or getting more involved in it.
Also, I think that if we do move towards developers writing automation, I think if it does happen, I think it'd be more of about the guidance of testers as well, though. So it's not like it's not going to be done by testers at all, but they're still going to have a big role in it, but just not doing it all, maybe.
Yeah.
Mm.
I think it's more. Oh,
yeah,
sorry.
Go on.
Go ahead. Okay. I think it's more as well that the role is transitioning to more of a quality advocate. So like being like an educator and like spreading the word and knowledge about test automation. But at the same time, I feel that there's still a lot of areas where we can contribute. So things like non-functional testing, exploratory testing, accessibility testing, those areas developers still need help or guidance. So yeah, I think it should be fine.
Yeah, I think it's important and critical to remember we're first and foremost testers. That's what we are. We contribute by through, like, one of the things is underlying exploratory testing and the ability to find those cases and help developers. But in our case, we have a team where we have Cypress and all different test coverages, and whenever I speak to developers, they're not actually creating a full coverage, even in Cypress. And we have like an end-to-end coverage through Selenium WebDriver IO. So we have constant free amigos to discuss who's taking what, which is kind of like, I personally prefer, I'm an automation engineer for a long time, and I prefer that developers take on that development part. And I'm like, yeah, you take it. I'm just gonna go off and explore find some cool things to do. And then they're like, oh, but this requires end-to-end. I'm like, oh, okay, fine, I'll write one end-to-end coverage for it, and then we'll review it in a couple of weeks' time. So like at the end of the day, actually, it's happy not to have to write that code sometimes, you know.
I suppose the fun parts of testing are the exploratory and the bit being able to do some coding. They're two very different, but they're still probably the fun parts of testing.
It's true. I'm just gonna set for one more minute because to add to the future of testing context here, there's also tool writing. So one of the things that people forget in automation is being referred to generically to testing, which is in the case testing is testing. Automation is for writing some sort of programmatic way of doing something, and that could be anything from having a Slack bot to remind you to do stuff. It could be something that you could do robotics. So we have cashless technology in our company where we make people make payments through like bracelets and stuff like that. And we have testers who sometimes just do it like constantly like this, like tapping away at devices. You can use robotics to do that for you. So I think the future of test automation, or I wouldn't even call it test automation, just automation in testing, would be literally anything from robotics to AI, right?
So I really love that, automation in testing.
Automation in testing is actually coined by it's coined by Richard Bradshaw and
really?
and Matthew Worthington. It comes from, I think, James Buck's thing, but James Buck and Michael Bolton, I kind of follow their school of thought in terms of automation and testing. We should not think that testing can be automated, and they've got like automated checks. They refer to them, and there's whole lot of stuff there that you should check out. But yeah, it's great stuff. Should we go look for? Oh, it's 5:50. There you go. This is a good place to stop. Sorry, Billy, running over.
All good, no worries.
I just wrapped this up by quickly saying these sessions are amazing. They're really good for creating thought, discussions. There is more here. These are not ignored. I'm probably going to run more sessions in terms of to do with automation and other topics. Feel free to spin up your own ones. It's really easy. You just basically send out a LinkedIn, share it among your group, the network will share it, invite people, and Metro Retro board is really easy to use. That's it. And really thank you for Billy for organizing this.
Thank you, Billy.
Yeah, thank you, Billy.
Thank you. Thank you, Billy. Thanks a lot.
No worries, guys. Keep safe, and thanks for coming along. Cheers for facilitating, Oleg.
Thank you. Thank you, Billy.
Cheers.
Thank you.
Good weekend, guys.
Thank you all of you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you all.
Bye-bye.